Hey everybody, welcome to this conversation, this interview right here. My name is Eric. I'm here with a good friend of mine, Billingston, and he's going to be sharing some life experiences, some of his life story, and in particular, one experience he had with the justice system several years ago. So, Billingston, before we get into all that stuff, I just want to ask you, have you told this story to anybody before? Like what you're about to share, does anybody know about this? Is this kind of common knowledge or?
A small few, a real small few. Maybe just a few friends, mostly family knows.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so not many people know about this.
No.
What do you think before this point has prevented you from sharing this with people?
I didn't want to make people feel uncomfortable. I didn't know how people would respond to it. And a big part of it, I was ashamed. I just stayed quiet about it. And I was still trying to process like exactly what happened and why it happened.
And everything, the story you're about to share, this happened how many years ago?
This happened maybe 7, 8 years ago when I just turned 18 years old.
Okay, so it's been 7 or 8 years. Something serious happens. You've told very few people about it because of shame or nervousness or worried about how you're being perceived. So now we're in 2020. What's changed? Like, what's making you want to share this now?
When I heard George Floyd, Mr. Floyd, scream out and cry for his mama, it brought me back to a familiar place. And that's where I'm at with it now.
So do you feel like, for example, like you said, okay, there's been a long time you've hesitated sharing because of shame or fear, but now when you saw stuff that happened with George Floyd, it's causing you want to share more, but like, has the shame disappeared or the nervousness about what people are going to think if you share this? Is any of that still there?
Not so much of somewhat shame, just because I feel like people could say like, why now? And kind of misunderstand my heart behind sharing. But also like now I feel like a responsibility to speak up for my community, for my people. And that's what led me to want to share now.
So, okay, we're about to dive into Billingston's story. Like when I've heard Billingston saying like, man, I felt nervous to share because, it makes things potentially uncomfortable or not sure how people are going to respond. It really makes me sad because I think it's impossible to have real authentic unity with people if we're unable to really share our stories or share our life experiences. So right now, I hope you guys can appreciate, and you will as Billingston shares this, but I hope you can appreciate that him getting on camera to record something like this is vulnerable and risky. There's a good chance that some of you guys are not going to like some of the things that he says or we say. This is volatile territory that we're entering into. And what I'd like to ask you all is that you would join him in the discomfort and in the tension. And just as it's uncomfortable for him to share, I'm hoping and praying that you're going to have courage to be uncomfortable while you listen, and that this conversation between my friend and I is going to help us have better conversations about things like this. So without any further ado, we can dive into it. Are you ready for this?
Let's jump in.
Do you feel nervous at all?
Maybe a little bit, but I'm good.
Yeah, okay.
I'm good.
All right, good. So why don't you, take us there, man, the one particular story you wanted to tell.
So one night, I got invited to my cousin's party. He was a big club promoter, and funny thing is, the name of his promotion team was called Greenhouse Effect. I know, right? Greenhouse Church, Greenhouse Effect. So he invites me. The party is maybe like around, I want to say, doors open at 8, 7, 8 o'clock. I didn't get there till about 10:30. So when I get there, I'm dressed in a tank top, like a gray tank top, some black jeans, like some fitted jeans, black Timbs, gold chain, jewelry, gold jewelry on, earrings, and at the time I was more muscular at the time. I played football, so my neck was a little bit bigger, and I was just significantly bigger than most people there. So I walk by and I walk past a few cops. One of the cops in particular, I noticed that he was maybe like 5'7". I'm 5'10", so I was much taller than him. So when I got there, the party had reached max capacity. So it was over 300 students out there. Mind you, these are all high school seniors or students that's already graduated.
Okay, yeah.
Like this is maybe a freshman year in college or something like that. So the cops are there, like there's maybe like 4 to 6 cops that's there. And with one of the cops, he starts to yell out, everyone needs to get in line. And if you get out of line, you have to go. That was his clear instructions, clear directions.
And that was a line to get inside?
Yeah, so the line is wrapped outside the door. So, and he's counting where he's gonna cut off the line and tell everyone they have to leave. So at that time, I know my cousin is throwing the party and my cousin's at the door. I'm in line. I'm like, I shouldn't have to wait in line. So let me call my cousin. So I'm trying to call him and he's not picking up. So I step outside the line and onto the curb and I stick my head out to the side and I'm like trying to get his attention. And the cop sees me out of line and he says, you out of line, you gotta go. Very, very stern, very rude. Just more so stern. And I think at that time I tried to explain to him like, my cousin is at the door, but he wasn't trying to hear it. Like, you gotta go. And I tried to explain, my auntie lives here, and he was like, you gotta go. So at this point, I get out of the line, but I'm walking really, really slow, purposely. So in hopes that my cousin will see me, and he'll be like, he's with me, he's a part of the team. So I'm walking. As I'm walking, he begins to like push me. He pushes me once. I kind of like tumble the first time. And he pushes me.
Pushing you from behind?
Pushing me from behind.
Okay.
So the second time he pushes me, I walk slower this time. Because I'm like, one, he's pushing me, so it's forcing me to walk a little faster, but he's also pushing me and I'm getting angry.
Yeah.
So the third time he pushes me, and I shrug my shoulders a little bit, like, and I look back at him and I say, you're only doing that because you have that badge on. And I don't know, that really offended him. So he put his hand on my shoulder really hard. He grabbed my shoulder. He says, hey guys, we got ourselves a tough guy here. We got ourselves a tough guy. And what do we do with tough guys? At this point, I'm still trying to get my cousin's attention. So they grabbed me. Well, he grabs me. He brings me in front of like 2 other cops. He says it again. We got ourselves a tough guy. He looks me in my eye. I look at him in the eye and I don't blink. And he looks, I look, and then he hits me. He throws a punch and he leans into it. Like he really leans into the punch. So when he hits me, at this point I'm a little confused. I said, well, what you hit me for?
Like he hit you in the face?
He hit me in my face. But I almost felt like maybe he was somewhat embarrassed that he hit me so hard, or he put all his power into it and nothing happened. Like I didn't fall. And I don't know, I feel like that angered him. After he hit me, another fist flew. Then another fist flew. Now at this point, all three of the cops that are there are hitting me repeatedly. And at one point I blacked out a little bit, more so in shock, like what's going on? I'm trying to process, as I'm getting hit, I'm processing, like, wait, what's really going on? Like, is this really happening to me right now? So as I'm getting hit, I start screaming out, help, like, help, help. So, but it's like, it was almost like a game to them. They were like laughing as they were beating me. And they're trying to get me to go to the ground, but I didn't want to go to the ground because I'm like, look, I don't know what's gonna happen if I go to the ground. So thank God, instead of bringing me to the ground, they dragged me to the trunk of the car and they slammed my face on the hood, on the back of the car.
The police car?
Yeah, the police car. And I felt like they were trying to break my arm. My arm was way behind me. And I'm screaming. At that point, I started screaming, Mom, Mama, Mommy, Mommy. Like, I screamed help, I screamed Mommy, Mom, Mama, like just screaming nonstop. And then they finally handcuffed me. And the cop made a comment like, I think he said something like, you need to shut up. I was like, yes, sir, yes, sir. He looked at his friends, he was like, oh, now it's sir. Oh, now it's sir. And yeah. So the cop arrests me. He kind of throws me in the back seat. And when I get back there, I'm back there with a guy he's like 6'4", 6'3", 6'4". He has a black hoodie on. He has black Timbs just like me on. He has black jeans on. And he's sweating bullets. I'm talking about just sweating. And the entire time, when I got in there, he says, hey, my foot is numb. Can you kind of help me move my foot? I asked him, how long you been in here? He says, I've been here since 7 o'clock. I think he said 7 or 8 o'clock. And he says his legs is numb, his foot is numb, there's no air conditioning back there. And he's just been sitting there for maybe like 4 or 5 hours. So I sit in the car for maybe 10 minutes and the cop comes back out. And they all come and they're kind of huddled around the side of the police car. And I hear them saying like, what are we gonna charge him with? What are we gonna charge him with? And like I'm overhearing the conversation, but at this point I'm panicking. I'm just afraid. It was like, what are we gonna charge him with? What are we gonna charge him with? So one of the guys get into the car and he sits in the car and he says, what's your name? I said, well, my name is Billingston Gene. He asks me how to spell it. And he keeps trying to pull up my name in his system. Nothing's coming up. And then he says, stop lying to me. What's your name? And I said, my name is Billingston. I just never been arrested before. And he smiled and he said, you will be today. And I'm like, dang, I'm gonna go to jail as an adult. I've never been to a county jail. I don't wanna go to a county. I'm afraid. So I say something like, the most embarrassing thing I said was to him, if you let me go, I promise I won't tell anyone. And he ignores me and I said, sir, I'm a college student. Can please, I'm just here visiting. Can I please go? Then he says, you're a college student? Even better. And he smiles. And when he said that, I don't know, something clicked in my head. I was like, oh, this is what this is. You know?
It clicked, like it made you feel like what? Like they're out to get you? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
then you're in the police car. Then what happens?
So I'm in a police car, and I hear them talking again before he drives off. He says, well, I don't want to bring him in. That's Felix's guy. And then the other guy says, well, just do it, John. So that was the two cops named Officer John and Officer Felix. I'll never forget it. The arresting agency was Broward County Sheriff. And they took us to the county. In my heart, I'm just praying. I'm like, at the time I wasn't really too religious or anything, so I said a prayer like to the God that my mom prays to, like just save me. Like if not for me, for her. And then I'm just quiet. So we finally get to the county. When you first get in, you go through this phase where they gotta strip you. So, and when the officers are stripping you, it's almost humiliating. Like it's almost like it was a game to them. And now I'm just this is my first time in the county, so I feel like in a sense violated. And then they bring you to this room. I don't know, at least that's how they did it with me. They brought me into this like intake room where you have to explain what happened, or they tell you what you're being, or like, I don't know what it was. Nothing was really explained. So I go into this room and I'm sitting in a seat just like this, and my head is down, and this guy says, what happened to your face? I don't answer him because I thought it was just something rhetorical. I thought at this point I just thought they're all the same. And he was a black guy. He said, and I shrugged my shoulders. The second time he asked me, I shrugged my shoulders, and I had like a long pause, and something was just like, just tell him. I said, I got hit. And then he says to me, wait, what? And then now I'm like battling in my mind, is he being funny? Is this a real question? He says, I said to him, with a fist. And he said, did you black out at any point? I said, yeah, I think so. I don't really remember everything. And he took like a deep sigh. He was a little upset. So he called Officer John back in. John came back in and he said, well, his charges don't align with his face, and he blacked out under your supervision. You got to bring him to the hospital. Like the cop caught a big attitude, like really upset. He was like, well, he has to go. He blacked out under your supervision. So I wish I would have just told them nothing. Yeah, I wish I would have just told them I never blacked out. Because now the same cop that was a part of beating me has to be the one to take me to the hospital. So he puts on the cuffs really tight, super tight, like angry at the fact that he has to bring me to the hospital. I get into the hospital, like we drive to the hospital, and I'm afraid, like I'm going to the hospital with this guy by myself. The other guy that I got arrested with, he's not there. So I'm just thinking of the worst case scenario. So I finally get to the hospital, and it's just super shameful. I walked in, and my head is down as I'm walking in. They're gonna put me like on this bench. Like it was like a bench across from this, like a bench against the wall. And when I look up, I see there's a white mom holding her son. And she covers his eyes like this. And she holds him really, really, really tight. And when she does that, I just put my head down in shame as well. Fast forward a little bit, they clean up my face. They don't give me any stitches. I think they gave me some medication, if I'm not sure.
Like, you know, where were your injuries? Like, what was your face like? You know, Did you just get hit in the face? Was it in your body? Like, anything else sore? Like,
Oh yeah, I mean my arm, my shoulder was sore. I almost felt like they snapped it out of place. My ribs was hurting, my stomach was hurting. I felt nauseous, felt like I had to throw up. I had like scarring on the side of my face. It was swelled. The side of my face was swelled, and I had like little blood coming out of it.
and at the hospital, they basically gave you like some pain medication. And...
Yeah, they just gave me some pain medication. Some of the nurses there actually treated me like I was human. So some of them did, some of them didn't. But overall, it was just an embarrassing experience because I had to sign all the paperwork in handcuffs, like handcuffed from the back, signing paperwork. And I kept trying to, like, every time the cop would put the handcuffs back on me, I would make noises in hopes that they would speak up and say, "Can you loosen the cuffs for him?" Because at that point, I didn't feel like I had a voice. I was afraid, like, if I say anything to the cop,
wow.
he's just going to be, like, angry with me. So,
wow.
But no one ever spoke up. And my voice was silent. And so he brings me back. But when I get back, it's chaos in there. Like
to the county jail?
Back to the county jail. He bring me back to the county jail, chaos. Like something happened with the system. Something was wrong with like I overhear them what they're talking about. Like the systems are down. Like no one could be processed out. So when I get back, they do this thing where they chain everybody up. They chain your hips and your legs, and they take you on this elevator, and you go upstairs, and they drop you off into this pod. That's the area. That's what they call it, a pod, like a holding area. And I got there, and the entire time I'm thinking, like, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? And at that time, I just had a lot of time to reflect. I kept thinking to myself, like, oh man, if I would never disobeyed my mom, she told me not to go out that night. If I would have just stayed home, this would never happen. And I was like, you see, my mom, she instilled so much great morals into me. She says, don't sag your pants. Well, I wasn't sagging my pants. She says, I always wear a belt every day. You step out the house, you market yourself. What was I doing outside with a tank top on? You know, I just kept trying to make reasons in my head that why this was okay. So I'm in the pod, and I'm just thinking, like, I should have never did this. And I was like, oh, this is what it is. If I would have never got disrespectful with the cop, like, because my mom told me, respect all your elders, this would never happen to me, right? And in a pod, I don't want to cry in the pod because there's adults there, there's younger guys there. It's my first time. I heard jail stories before. So, and it's very different from being arrested as a minor. The process is very different. So at this point, I just don't know what to do. I finally get a chance to speak to my mom over the phone, and I call her, and I remember picking up the phone, and when I called my mom, I didn't do much talking. I just said hello, and I was quiet, and she said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm okay. I just got back from the hospital." She was like, "They beat you?" And I was like, "Yeah." At that point, I wanted to break down, but she was just so strong over the phone. And I'll never forget, she said, "Mami avini, Mami avini. Mommy's coming. Mommy's coming." And in that moment, like, I just thought about it, like, that same comfort the little white boy had, that's the same comfort my mom was able to provide over the phone. Then I said, you know, the Haitian culture, I really love the Haitian culture, but we're not the best with words of affirmation. We're more like acts of service. So I can count. I don't, you know, actually I don't know how many times I ever heard my mom say I love you. I was just expressed it by the things that she does for me. And over that phone, she said, Mami Avini, don't cry. I love you, baby. I love you.
Mm.
And that just brought me so much encouragement while I was in there.
Mm.
And I almost got a little entitled. I was just like, well, my mom is coming. My mom said she's coming. Well, so I'm good. And when they would give out food, I was like, in my head, I'm like, I'm not eating the food here. I'm not drinking the water. My mom said she's coming. I felt so empowered.
Wow.
18 hours go by. Mommy's not here yet. So I called my mom with a little attitude. I said, Mom, you said you're coming. Where you at? You know, she says, we can't find your name on the system. We can't, it's not coming up. Their system is down. We have a friend that's working on it right now who knows somebody on the inside that's trying to give us information. So that was discouraging, but it was so encouraging to have her, to know that my mom was coming. Like the woman that I was crying out for was coming for me. Just like Mr. Floyd when he cried out. And that's what really brought me back to that place.
Yeah.
Hearing, having the tank top on just like Mr. Floyd had his tank top on, and being significantly bigger than the arresting officers.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then you're in county jail for, like, how long were you supposed to be there?
Honestly, I think I was only supposed to be there for no more than 13 hours. I mean, it was a petty crime.
Like in and out, basically.
Yeah, in and out. I mean, I didn't even know the charge. I don't even know if the guy who,
Wow.
the cops never told me the charge. I even asked my mom what they arrested me for. Like, I never knew anything. I just know that I was in there and I was waiting on my mom to come get me. I didn't know anything else.
Which was how long did you end up being in there?
I ended up staying in there for like 36 hours. Just thinking about it, it's like I didn't know I was arrested.
Yeah.
It felt like a game was being played with me. I don't know.
So you get out, your mom tells you, so what was the actual charge that they charged you with?
Oh, man. They charged me with trespassing. But it was my auntie's apartment complex. I was invited there. I don't know how this stuff works. I don't know if that was a reasonable charge.
That sounds crazy.
Yeah.
You're visiting your family's neighborhood.
Mm.
You got a trespassing charge.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so you get a trespassing charge, and then now what happens next?
Well, I thought it was over. Well, they fast forward a little bit. I have to go to court. So they ordered me to go to court. And I just thought that because it was such a small charge, then it shouldn't be that big of a deal. So I get to court and I'm there with my mom. My mom, she speaks Creole and French. English is not her first language, so it's a lot of things she just doesn't know, a lot of things I don't know. And then she starts reading something. She says, if pled no contest or found guilty, and if you're not a U.S. citizen, you can or you could be subjected to deportation or something like that. And when she said that, it's like I lost my breath in a sense. I like put my head down and she said, she was reading something and she stopped. She says, wait, are you not a U.S. citizen? I said, no, ma'am, I'm not a U.S. citizen. I'm a permanent resident and my green card is expired. And she stopped, she looked around, and then she asked me a few questions. Well, here's the funny part. She asked me a few questions, and then come to find out her grandkids also go to the University of Florida. In my head, I'm thinking like, this would be a crazy story if I actually ran into her.
Yeah,
Into
her
the
granddaughter at school,
granddaughter,
yeah.
like, hey, guess what? Your grandma was gonna be the one to. Anyway, but she works. I don't know what she did. She worked something out. She offered something else. She talked. She made a few phone calls. I sat in the courtroom for maybe an hour. She worked on something for maybe about 15, 20 minutes. And then they had me sign this form. I didn't know what I was signing. But pretty much I signed it. And in return, what I would have to do was have 2 months. I would be able to go back to Gainesville. I would be on probation while I'm there for a couple months. I would have to write an apology letter, and I would also have to do 150 to 250 community service hours. To me, it was crazy for trespassing, but my mom and I saw it as a blessing because I was like, well, you can be deported. But the most disturbing part of that day wasn't even being sentenced, or it was what I heard going into the courtroom. When I was walking into the courtroom, I heard these two guys going back and forth with each other. I believe there were two public defenders, two lawyers, I don't know, going back and forth with each other. And the guy says, well, why can't you do this for me this time? He said, I did it for you last time. And he said, he hands him over a folder. He says, what am I looking for? He said, I don't even know his name. What is his name? He says, his last name is Longway, as in long way from home. Just represent him. So that stuck with me for a long time. Like, he doesn't know, he never met the guy. He doesn't know anything about the case, and he's gonna go represent.
Like they're passing off when they're about to go into court.
Yeah, they're somebody that the attorney has to go advocate for. Yeah. That made me terrified. I was like, oh my goodness.
That was before you went in for the sentencing?
That's before I went into for sentencing, yeah.
So this blows my mind, man. So you're at a party at your aunt's and your cousin's house that they're throwing, and you essentially get assaulted by multiple police officers because you had stepped out of line, or maybe you talked back a little bit or something like that. That's the extent of your infraction, I guess. So you get beat up, and then county jail, then you have to go to the hospital, then back, charged with trespassing, which to me, I don't know, I haven't studied any of this stuff, so it just, to me, that sounds insane. What a heavy story. Is that like in your life, is that your first experience with cops, or what was your relationship with law enforcement or the justice system in general, leading up to that point?
Well, so with law enforcement, I think that was my first-hand experience. Was something I personally experienced something. Everything else I was more so of a witness of. I know growing up, a lot of times I grew up in the hood. The first neighborhood when I came to America, I stayed in East Fort Lauderdale. Very drug-infested neighborhood. I met a lot of kids that experienced a lot of injustice that became normal to them. They would do these things where if you heard like a car, like the tires screeching, you would have to just get up and run. In movies, you think it's a drive-by, so people, but what actually in the neighborhood is not a drive-by that we're afraid of, is undercover cops. So they would do these things, they'll do these stings, or they'll just jump out all these kids or anyone that's walking, and they will frisk you and search you. But in doing that, a lot of times, a lot of kids will get beat really bad. So it became this thing. If we seen any car or minivan, anything with dark tinted windows, jump out, or like stop and is looking at us, just take off and run. So it's like almost we turned it into a game. We would run, and some of us would have our football helmets with us because we're coming from Little League football. So that was my first real experience encountering it. Then I moved to another neighborhood in Lauderhill, Florida. It was called Deep Side. I don't know why they call it Deep Side, but one incident I really remember was we was outside playing football, and this van pulls up, and inside the van, we didn't know what was inside the van. Inside the van was, I think it was SWAT team or U.S. Marshals. They jump out with guns and they start throwing like mini explosive bombs everywhere. Like it's like light bombs. I don't know what it was, yeah. But all we heard was they jumped out the car, and a lot of them jumped out with guns and just started throwing things everywhere. And a few of my friends just kind of just dove on the ground, and one of them dove on top of one of the bombs, and it exploded underneath him, and it burnt him from the stomach up all the way down to his legs, his penis area, everywhere was burnt. He had to go into the hospital, and he's on the ground just screaming, like, I can't feel my legs, just screaming. Oh. Another kid, he was probably like 8 years old. They put him in handcuffs. They put another 7-year-old girl in handcuffs. At that point, everyone that was in that area was just in handcuffs, kids to adults. They broke down the door. Guns is everywhere. Guns are in front of like old women, and they're screaming at them to shut up. Like everyone's confused, and my mom, she's screaming like, "Oh, I think they shot one of them, but they didn't shoot anyone." And then when they left, it became just reality again. We just started playing football again. Like the other kids just started playing football again. And the last experience I will share is, this is actually something I experienced in middle school. This African-American girl, black girl, pregnant. She was pregnant. And this was plantation police officers. So we're at this community center, and I come into the community center, and there's this cop. He's maybe like 6'3", big guy, big hands. And then there's this black girl in there that wants to fight this white girl. Apparently, I don't know, I guess the white girl was messing around with her man or something. I don't know what it was. But she was like, no, I want her to come out, because I think she wanted to fight the girl. But her stomach was really big. She seemed like she was at least 7 months pregnant. And the cop pulls up on the scene, and the cop is like, he gets there and he's just like, I need you to shut up. The girl is just going off. He's like, shut up, I need you to. And he takes a deep breath in. He looks to the side a little bit, puts his hands on his hips, and he gets so angry. And he takes his hand and takes her face and just slams it on the wall. And everybody goes quiet. And he's pressing her face against the wall. He arrests her and throws her in the back of the seat, pregnant woman. And then I have many other stories. Like I seen a kid get arrested for hitting a nay-nay in front of a cop. I just
Dancing.
it was dancing. He
Yeah.
just he danced in front of the cop car. I don't know. Cop got upset. Threw him in. We don't know what happened to that kid. So when we see things like that, it just became normal. I remember Dr. Mason came to visit here, and he was speaking on diversity at our diversity forum. And I met another guy named, I believe his name was J.C. Jones, and he asked me a simple question. He said, "What do you think? What is justice to you?" And mind you, I'm 26. I'm like, I couldn't answer. I said, I don't know. I said, I think justice is privilege. I was like, injustice is so normal that when you ask a young black boy what is justice, I think if you did some type of case study or some type of survey, a lot of them wouldn't be able to tell you, wouldn't be able to relate to this idea of what justice is. To this day, I'm still trying to truly understand, like, what is justice?
Sounds like you're saying like they, maybe even if they had a definition, do you feel like, I'm trying to process what you're saying, maybe even if they knew what justice was, maybe they don't have an expectation that they can get it, or they can, does that sound right? Does that sound like what you're saying?
Yeah, somewhat. Like, it's just, a lot of them never experienced justice. Sometimes for you to know what something is, you have to experience and so have some type of encounter with it.
Okay. I see.
At least for a lot of the kids that I grew up with, we don't know what justice is.
Wow.
We never encountered it. We've seen so much injustice. Like, I've seen a lot of violent things in our neighborhood. Like, I seen broad day shootings. Like, kids getting off the school bus and people are shooting at each other. But there was so much distrust with the officers, with cops. When cops would come and try to ask questions, we would all reject the cops. Like, we didn't know who to turn to. And a lot of them, when they would come and ask questions, it's like they didn't speak to us like we were humans. They spoke to us like we was part of the problem. And we just didn't trust cops.
So can I ask you some hard questions about some of this stuff?
Yeah.
To catch your reflections. I love this because you're a disciple. So I feel like one of the things that I've been really impressed with you about this is how you respond and your desire, to use your phrases before, like to be a bridge. And I think not everybody that has experienced what you've experienced, I would guess that's not everybody's heart posture. I think it's part of the testimony of the work of Jesus in your life, that you're able to approach things in like a humble, God-fearing way, God-honoring way. But with that in mind, I'm gonna throw some questions out at you because I know people watching there'll be some things running through their mind. So here, I'll just throw some, just to start off. So this is your experience. Mm-hmm. Do you hate cops now?
No.
Why not?
You know, even when I was beat up, I can wholeheartedly say I never hated them. I never hated cops. I was afraid. You know, at that time, I was afraid to say I was afraid. I get around cops, I get anxiety. I didn't want to hate, but I didn't trust.
Yeah.
I don't trust them. Well, I didn't trust them. Very, very uncomfortable around cops.
So now, so it's been like 7 or 8 years. What has happened since then that has shaped your view of law enforcement?
One, Christ.
Which, by the way, okay, so you said you were 18. How long after that did you start following Jesus? Like, how long after that did he save you?
1, 2. Maybe 4 years after that.
Okay. So maybe like 22, 23.
Yeah, 22, 23. When I actually decided to accept this as my own and not just something my mom taught me.
Yep.
You know, I kind of knew about Christ growing up. I heard the songs growing up, but I just never, Christ wasn't, I didn't identify with Christ or as a member, part of his body.
Okay, so your relationship with Jesus has affected how you view police officers.
That's the first part.
Yeah, what else?
My personal steps that I took to be uncomfortable. So what I started doing was I couldn't talk, like I was afraid to talk to it about around certain guys because I was too ashamed, and I was terrified of cops. So what I started doing was slowly I would talk with cops. Like I would see a cop in an open setting, or if he's by his car, like I would wave and I would walk over to him and I would just ask a basic question. I said, "How you doing?" And then if I felt like he was open to having a conversation, he'd be like, "I'm good." And as I start talking to them, the guard would come down a little bit, and I always ask the same question to every cop: "Why did you want to become a cop? Like, what is your idea of cops? What risk do you take being a cop?" Like, I just was really trying to understand their world. Like, how do they think? Why do they think like this? Is the cops the problem, or is it the system? Is it what they're being taught? So I did some really in-depth analysis, I guess, a lot of researching. And imagine going through that and being pulled over by a cop. So now you pulled over and you low-key fidgety. Like you panicking, like I'm panicking, I'm fidgety, I'm anxious, I'm sweating.
And now you look suspicious.
And now you look suspicious.
Oh, gosh.
So it's something I had to get over quick.
Wow.
Like if I didn't get over it quickly, it could cost me my life. So some parts of it was forced, but a lot of parts of it was I wanted to be healed. I didn't want it to control me anymore. Yeah.
Do you feel like that helped?
It was hard.
Yeah, no kidding, man.
And one thing I never did, I never told any cop my experiences with cops. Because I knew that would just make them tense, make them feel like maybe they have to perform, or worse, justify what the other cops did.
Like explain it away.
Yeah. So for a long time, I just stayed. Just kept asking questions.
So just pause there for a second. Anybody that's listening, and if you're still listening to the video at this point, fantastic. Super glad that you've stuck with us. I just want you to, I hope you can acknowledge how exceptional it is that Billingston, who was assaulted by police officers, went through all the stuff that he went through, because he follows Jesus in an attempt to basically tell yourself a different narrative or tell yourself a different story. You would go talk to other police officers. that's like, first of all, I mean, I can't even, I don't know if I could think of another, that's just an excellent example of godliness. Like, I don't know anybody apart from Jesus. That's so hard to do, to go and essentially, like, I'm going to go try and befriend someone who represents something that's been so hurtful to me in a lot of ways. So just, I want to commend you for that. That's exceptional. I also want to be clear to everybody listening, that should never have to happen. So that's like, that's a, I mean, I know we're going to get into it a little bit. I just, like, well, we can circle back to that. But I just wanted to sink in that Billingston, who was beat by police officers, is also one that was reaching out to reestablish relationships, or to be a bridge, you know, the phrase that you like to use. So that's twisted. But man, really represents the character of Jesus, I feel like. So anyway, okay, I wanted to kind of address that when you said that. Ready for another question? Yeah, anything else you want to say about that?
I'll come back to it.
Okay, if you think of something, throw it out. Okay, I'm just gonna try and get your response to some statements, or maybe some objections that people might have. So this is, so what would you say to someone who says, let's say someone just heard your story, they were talking to you, and they say something along the lines like, hey man, this was your fault. Like, you can't blame police officers for doing this. This was your fault. If you wouldn't have been at the party, if you wouldn't have been in that neighborhood, if you wouldn't have been dressed that way, if you wouldn't have been talking to them like that, then those officers never would have done that to you. What kind of response would you have to something like that?
Well, I mean, welcome to the club. I mean, for a long time, I mean, that's how I thought. I thought that if I was never dressed like that, maybe if I wasn't so intimidated looking, or if I didn't have a tank top on, but they're lies. And going through my healing, the truth began to come out. And the truth is, that was wrong.
Yes.
And whether my blackness, my dark skin, my swagger, the way I speak, the way I walk, shouldn't intimidate you and shouldn't be a reason why somebody gets beat. Like, I heard something when after Trayvon Martin got shot, I heard a man say, "It's those darn hoodies. It's those darn hoodies." And you know, at one point I started believing it too. It's those darn hoodies. And I think a lot of black moms can tell you this, or black sisters can tell you this. Like, they started telling their sons or their little brothers or older brothers, don't wear a hoodie at night, or try not to wear hoodies. But I can't stop being black. I'm not gonna water down my swag. I'm not gonna stop speaking the way I speak.
Yeah.
So if it offends you, or if you feel like that is a justification to somebody getting beat, I think you should really think through it some more. Whether you believe in Jesus or not, like, if you have a heart, if you really process it, if you really think through it, you'll see that it's false.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you 100% on that. And just so you know, from like an outsider, like I told you this before, but that should not have happened. That's not okay that happened. And as your friend, man, I'm like, it's like you're 26 now, so this is several years after this happened, and you're Like it's taken you years to process the trauma of that. That's not okay. That's not okay. That should never happen.
And I think that's a part of it. Like I'm choosing to believe that and reworking through some of the norms of my life or what I've seen growing up. Things that I hear. Yeah.
So what would you say to someone who says police brutality is a myth?
Well, honestly, I don't even know what to say to it. I would say just type in on Google police brutality. You know, just look at certain videos. I mean, it's out there. So whether you choose to be in denial, that's up to you. But
So police brutality exists, obviously, as your story represents. Do you think that all police officers do stuff like this?
I think all police officers are capable
Okay.
of doing stuff like this.
Because of the authority they have, or
Authority, because they choose to, because they can get away with it. The lack of education that they have. And what I mean by that, like a lot of cops are socially ignorant, culturally ignorant. And I would say that to be condescending, but it's true.
you mean like culturally, like just not aware of the nuance of culture, the dynamics of different cultures? Is that what you mean by that? We say culturally ignorant?
Yeah, part of that.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is just in my head. I just think like, not only are some of them culturally ignorant, they have a lack of awareness to why things are the way that they are. Ignorance towards privilege, and this could just be something I personally think, but even the fact that like you don't really need a college degree to be a cop. You could just enroll right out of high school. And so you have somebody with not much education background, not much awareness.
Cultural awareness.
And so that's why I said a lot of it is a system problem. Of course, they come into the academy with their own biases, with their own way of thinking, with their own prejudices, both white and black cops.
Yeah. Do you think it's possible that there are good cops?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I met a lot of good cops.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Christ did for me. Like he allowed me to meet good, healthy cops that were super honest about things that they seen, things that they know goes on. I met good, woke, healthy white people that helped me begin to change because a lot of cops I saw growing up were white cops. There's a few black cops, but even some of the black cops I saw, I wouldn't say they wasn't much different, but the way they handled us wasn't much different. They probably wasn't beating on us, but the way they spoke to us, it's like they spoke to us like we already was guilty. It's like, it feels like sometimes being black feels like you're guilty into proven innocent versus innocent into proven guilty. So I felt a lot of that with cops.
It's so interesting because I feel like just while you're saying that, I feel like a lot of discussion about this really centers on our individual experience with law enforcement. Like, I'll tell you, man, for me personally, the neighborhoods that I grew up in, we almost never had cops coming through there. I mean, seeing police cars was rare, unless it was like one of us called them for something. Like, I remember my truck got broken into one time, so we had to call the cops. They came and they checked. There was like several houses. Besides that, like, I never had police patrolling my neighborhood. I never, like the stuff you're talking about, I never was in places like that. So to me, it makes a lot of sense where people like me, if that's your experience with police, you would have a very different view than the experience that you've had. Like, the story you just told me is horrific. And like, if I was in your shoes, I feel like you're handling it way better than I would be able to handle it. So like, just when you're talking about that, like, talking about like, first, like, you've met good cops. It's like my experience with police has always created the perception for me that that all cops are good. So I want to get ready to wrap up soon, but I want to give people some action steps, like some application, like based on this conversation. If someone listened to this whole thing, what are some things that you would want them to do? Some takeaways you want them to have, or steps you want them to take as they're processing this?
I want to just take a second to advocate for the black community. And this would be like a commission to my white brothers and sisters, or anyone who's not black. It was really uncomfortable for me to go to somebody that looked like someone that caused me harm. I already had my own prejudices built after the fact.
We're talking about when you're going to talk to police. Yeah, uncomfortable, I feel like is a very nice way to say that.
Yeah.
That's a very mild way to say that.
It was super uncomfortable for me. I had to take the step to get to know, why do they think the way that they think? Why is the system the way that it is? And what, like, just even thinking, like, get uncomfortable and be okay with being uncomfortable. Like, the experience of blacks is like, we live in America where we're constantly uncomfortable. And one experience I even share with being uncomfortable, even being at a university, I attended the University of Florida, and we'll have lecture halls. And inside the lecture hall, would have 500, 700 students, sometimes 1,000. And then when you walk into a lecture hall, it's maybe 3 or 4, or maybe sometimes even 1 black student. So that was very uncomfortable. And asking questions was really, really uncomfortable. For one, if I asked the question the wrong way, well, I would live up to the stereotype that they're not that intelligent. He's not that smart. Maybe he's an athlete. Maybe that's how he got here. I have so many things I have to work through just to ask a question.
Jeez.
Now, whereas my white counterpart, they just ask the question. They're comfortable. And African Americans live a very, very uncomfortable life that they had to learn to become comfortable with. So if I had any commission, was to get uncomfortable with knowing the truth, and that when you know the truth, or if you disagree with it, figure out why you disagree with it. But if you do know it and you do agree with it, let's have some action steps. Why are the communities the way that they are? Is black people just naturally violent? Why is the neighborhood the way? Why is education and poverty-stricken neighborhoods the way that it is? Do you know about the new Jim Crow? Do you know about redlining? The education disparities, like I would say, get to know those things.
Yeah.
And to the black community, to my black brothers and sisters, don't be silent. Like, I repent, like, for being silent. Speak up, let your voice be heard. Do what needs to be done. And if you're a Christian, if you're a black that happens to be a Christian, or a Christian that happens to be black, however you want to say it, be the first action step to peace.
Like, take the first step.
Yeah.
Be a peacemaker.
Peacemaker. And what I firmly believe is, when we say peacemaker, peacemaker doesn't mean making everybody feel comfortable.
Yes.
Or being quiet. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons and daughters of God. That doesn't mean the peacemakers are the protesters. They're protesting to cause peace.
Yes.
Accept the commission that God has given you. And even going back to the commission a little bit, in commissioning, whites have a unique ability, I think we spoke about this, have a unique ability to, and hold the power essentially to be able to include and take the biggest step towards unity.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think that it's blacks, people of color, who should take a bigger step than they're already taking now. Because we're fighting for unity. We're fighting for inclusion and diversity. That's the only reason why we have things like inclusion and diversity, because of things like that.
Yeah.
So I would have challenged my wonderful white brothers and sisters to take the first steps.
Yeah, take initiative.
Take initiative.
Yeah.
And to my black brothers and sisters, allow it to happen.
Yeah.
Allow it to happen.
It's true, man. I would guess that the vast majority of diversity initiatives are started by minorities.
Yeah.
The conversations are started. It's advocated for. Fought for a lot of times. All right, we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. I just want to give a final reminder, maybe final context. God, in the beginning, created humanity, and He created us in perfect relationship with Him and in perfect relationship with each other. There was total harmony. So, like with the first humans, Adam and Eve, there was no discord, there was no jealousy, there was no hatred, there was no violence, and it was perfect the way that God created it. But then Adam and Eve, they rebelled against God, and as soon as they chose to go away from God's path, they introduced discord into human relationships. First, they broke their relationship with God. and then they damage their relationship with each other. And ever since then, ever since that moment, humanity has struggled with the relational dynamic that sin has produced. So even when we're talking about this stuff, the greater context for racial tension and injustice and oppression, the greater context for all that is sin. It's sin. And the bad news is if it was just us on our own, the bad news is we have no way out of that. We created the relational discord and we don't have the capacity to fix it on our own. The good news is Jesus came down and he became like us. And he lived the perfect life that we should have lived. And he lived in harmony with people, towards people. And he was a peacemaker. Jesus was the ultimate peacemaker. But it wasn't just polite and pretty. He ruffled a lot of feathers, which eventually landed him on a cross. And on the cross, he makes the ultimate sacrifice. And in the New Testament, this is what they, in some of the epistles later on, they would say that Jesus made peace by the blood of his cross. And so Billingstone said, hey, if you're a Christian, if you're a Christian and you're black, I think just to stay in that context, if you belong to Jesus, we have something that no one else has. We have the potential for peace and unity that the world needs right now. And if we can't get it right here, I have no idea how we're going to help the world get it right. And so this, Billingstone, I want to really, really sincerely thank you for your courage to share your story. And I'm praying that this is going to be like a sign to everybody of the potential for what can happen under the covering of Jesus. What Jesus offers is the only hope. Jesus is our only hope for this. So, man, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing, for being such an incredible example, man, for modeling really well for people what it means to process pain in light of what Christ has done.
I love you, Mama.
That was great, man. Thank you for sharing.